Don Mazzella here again for Small Business Digest. You know, leadership is something we talk about. Everybody talks about it. Everybody has an opinion. Uh, I've seen good leaders, I've seen bad leaders, and I've seen everything in between. We have Gary Laney with us today. He's going to talk about some of the four essentials of leadership. Gary, welcome to the program.
Hey, Don, thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, you know, as we asked all our guests, first tell us a little bit about yourself personally, then a little bit about what you're doing, and finally a website.
Hey, well, that's a long story. How much time do we have?
Well,
I'm just
we
kidding.
like to hear them. We like to hear long stories on this show.
Oh, good, good. Well, I'm
But
guess
Gary,
I'm
before we go further, you got to look
yeah.
up at the. So you're looking down at the screen instead of up at. That's better. Yeah. Okay. That's the way it should be.
Okay, well, I'll look into the camera, so thank you. So Don, I'm kind of in my fourth career. I don't know how many careers you're supposed to have, if there's a defined unit, but um, I grew up in a family business. My father was an entrepreneur, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. It's a long line of entrepreneurs. And so I knew someday that I would be an entrepreneur like my father, etc. My father never worked for anyone. You know, the interesting thing about entrepreneurship is it's a lot of ups and downs. You carry a lot of roles, you have a lot of hats, a lot of responsibilities. And I don't remember, even though my father was successful, I know he went through a near bankruptcy one time. I never remember him showing that stuff at home. And sometimes your life as an entrepreneur is not separated no matter where you go, whether you're at home or whether you're traveling, whether you're at work. And so that I admired that a lot from my dad, and so I've tried to emulate that throughout my life. So I grew up in a retail business. My dad owned a chain of stores, 5 or 6 stores. I grew up learning everything about business. So I was pretty unique in that sense. The people that um, go to work for a company, they're hired to do one specific thing, and then they might change roles a little bit. They might get more opportunity. But my dad started me at the bottom, and every day, most kids go home to school. I went to my dad's store, one of his stores, and I worked. And so he gave me chores, and then year after year, I got more responsibilities. And finally, to the point where I was doing accounting and marketing, I ran sales for one of his departments, and then finally, I ran one of his stores. And ultimately, before he retired, he let me buy his very first store. You know, it was his baby, the thing he started back in the 50s. And here I was buying it in the late 80s or early 90s. I forget what exactly the year. But what a great experience that was for me to go through that whole experience, to understand business from the bottom up. When I got by the way, I always call my experience with my dad my first MBA, because you get a very well-rounded education when you get your MBA. And I went to Northwestern Kellogg, and so it was a great experience. And I would never say anything but that. But the practical experience and the mentoring and the tutelage from my father, over those many years was extraordinary. So that was kind of how I grew up. When I got into college, I decided I wanted to get a graduate degree. Somebody advised me, a very smart guy that I admired, who had a Harvard MBA, who had been a state senator. His name was Bill Jones. Unfortunately, not around with us anymore. But Bill told me I should go to business school, but I shouldn't just apply right out of undergrad. I should get some experience first, so I could get into a top school. And so that was really important advice for me, because I was not going to get there without that experience. So I took a job as a director of sales with a company, and for the next 2 years, really worked hard to produce and to deliver results and have a good experience as a management a person in this company. And it was a commercial publishing company, by the way. So when I then applied 2 years later, credit to Bill for his advice, I was getting accepted at top 10 schools, at Northwestern, at Wharton, at Yale, at Columbia. And my goal was to apply to the top 13 schools and get accepted to 10 of them. Well, I got accepted to 7 after making an application, I think, to 13. and I'd had enough, and I had a great menu to choose from. Kellogg, if you're familiar with Kellogg, follows the regimen of a lot of the top business schools, meaning it has case study, etc. But it was flexible enough because it's a marketing school that was pragmatic approach for me because I was a marketing guy. So I had an undergrad in marketing. I wanted to get a graduate degree in marketing. The fortunate part is when I got to Kellogg, because of my background in business and also my undergrad marketing degree, they told me that I could waive my initial credits. I wanted to go through a 2-year school. I guess I could have gone through their 1-year program, but I really wanted to experience it. So basically, I was able to waive the initial basic courses and go right into electives. Ended up with a 3 major MBA, finance, policy, and marketing. And what a great experience that was. I also was the co-chairman of the consulting club. And I did an internship with a marvelous guy named Tom Kuzmarski. And this was in Chicago. So what a great experience that was. When I came out of there, I went right back into industry. I took a job with a consulting company. And then I was recruited to be the VP of sales for another company. So in a matter of a few years, I went from, wanting to get into a good MBA program, wanting to have management experience. And now here I was as a VP of sales for a company and looking forward to my future. A few years later, I ended up pursuing my minor at Northwestern, which was IT or information systems. So I decided to go to work as a national sales manager for a software company. That evolved into many different roles with different companies, some of which are owned by Oracle today. And I worked for a public company. I helped take public and was the VP of sales there. So my career ended up in high tech for about 20 years. About that time, my children were older. My sons were at the age where I wanted to be home. I didn't want to be traveling. If you've ever been in sales, especially in management, you're at the beck and call of anyone that needs your help, no matter where, so you can close the big deals. So I decided to post myself into my position as an entrepreneur. I left at a time where I was doing really well. My wife was concerned. We were building a big house in Orinda, California. And she wondered where the money was going to come from if I just, all of a sudden left. I decided to kind of shore up my bet by going together with a guy in a partnership, still entrepreneurial, did that for a couple of years, and then went full on as an entrepreneur about 2005. So it's been about 19 years, approaching 20, and I haven't looked back. And like my father, I pushed forward. I've been involved in 12 different businesses that I've owned. Those 12 businesses related to e-commerce, to a software business that I also was involved in, and in training. I've got to the point where I was I had some good expertise, which what I teach about in my new book, Become a Super Leader, and the previous one, The Power of Strategic Influence. So it was gratifying to me to be able to look back and say, I've got all these skills. I've been building companies. I've been building businesses for others for all these years, and now I can finally do it for me. So for me, it was a lot of fun to find a business that needed to be turned around, a small business, grow it, build it, and then exit from it. I did that 12 times. And so that was kind of my career as you know it on a professional basis. Now, then COVID happened in 2020. Anyone that remembers back those days, no one expected it to last maybe until the summertime. And I certainly didn't. And so I had just sold off my networking business. I owned a company called Trustegrity. Trust plus integrity equals Trustegrity. And I had started from scratch, co-founded this business and grew it to a national concern. And about that time, I decided that I would exit and because I had a good buyer, and I kind of sold off all my business assets at that time in 2020. I found myself with time for the first time. I don't know if I ever had this kind of time before, but I thought I had about 6 months before COVID let up and I could go back into doing things like I was doing in the event and networking business. As we all learned, it didn't go away. And so my daughter, my granddaughter, and my wife all were writing books and invited me to do the same. And I've been wanting to write a book for 15 years. And reasons for that is because I've been training for so long. I had a lot of material, I had a lot of content, and some of the people that mentored me were Stephen Covey back in the 80s. That 10 years before his book Seven Habits became so famous, before he was on the Oprah show, before he had the Wall Street Journal column, Stephen Covey was experimenting with my salespeople, and we were learning about these habits that we had no idea would become so famous. We just had no clue. I really was endeared by these principles, and they became part of my life for the next 30 plus years. So every sales group I've ever managed, I've taught the 7 habits. As you do that, though, you extrapolate, you extend them, and they become principles based upon your circumstance, your industry, your salespeople. Because Stephen taught philosophical principles, I needed them to become pragmatic so that we could actually get things accomplished. So I've done that. And so the reason I wrote a book in 2020 about strategic influence, not just influence, but strategic influence, was because I had learned how to take the principles of relationships, which is what 7 Habits is really all about, and to apply them to business so that you could make progress by strategic relationships you're developing to help you, create long-term and satisfying and meaningful relationships that would allow you to be able to sell over and over, to manage people that would follow you over and over. And that's been my life. It's been a really exciting experience to go through all that. So The Power of Strategic Influence was a book I wrote, 10 Success Factors of Highly Influential Leaders. I've spent the last 2 or 3 years doing a few things. One, speaking about my book. I speak at universities, associations, and corporations quite a bit. And then the other part was to find a way to make that, part of my legacy and teaching people just what influence on a strategic level is all about. That's led me to interviewing some amazing people. 16 people that I've interviewed so far, 12 for my first book and 4 for my last book. The first book was full of globally known leaders from different sectors, the different parts of the world, from India to Africa to the United States, West Coast, East Coast. There were 6 men, 6 women. And then my newest book, Become a Super Leader, I interviewed just 4 people, because there were, as you mentioned at the beginning, 4 essential anchors, I call them, of influential leadership and how to master that leadership, not just understand it. So, for example, Nando Cesaron, who's the president of UPS of US of UPS, I was introduced to. That's how this principle works. If people trust you, Don, and they don't have to worry about you, and they will introduce you to people without any worry. And I have people like that in my life that'll introduce me to people because they don't have to worry that I'm going to do a good job, that I'm going to represent them well, that I'm going to take good care of the person that they introduce me to, even though they might be highly influential and a high-level executive like Nando. So Nando and I were introduced. He liked the concept of my book about strategic influence. We had a discussion about it. Then he decided that he wanted to read the book. I got him a copy. He's a very busy guy, runs the US, runs aviation for UPS. I mean, he has a lot of responsibility. Took him several months to read it. He sent me a note one day that he was on vacation, and he took my book with him. So that was a feather in my cap. And then he wanted to actually have a discussion and go through the book together. And at that point, I realized that he really took it seriously, that he was getting the principles I was talking about, that he cared about that as a leader. And in my book, I refer to him as someone with emotional intelligence, which is a kind of a important term these days, but he really exemplifies it. And I saw it firsthand because he invited me to HQ, UPS HQ in Atlanta, to do a recording and to interview him. And by the way, on April 5th coming up, I'm going to have an opportunity to do that again. It's been a year and a half since I interviewed him. I'm going to be at the University of South Carolina, the Dartmouth School of Business, and I have managed or arranged, an influential leadership conference. Nando's going to be the featured speaker there, and he asked me not to just do a featured keynote. He wants me to interview him again in front of all the students, the business people, the academic crowd that we're putting together. So, long story short, that's it. David Meltzer's in my new book. Cindy Bigelow from Bigelow Tea, and also Jody Richards, process technology company. So amazing leaders that follow the principles of my book. In fact, the conference on April 5th, we have 8 of us speaking. The president of Coca-Cola Consolidate is also speaking. Kimberly Carney from Fashwire is speaking. There's 8 of us, and everyone is taking a topic out of my book. So my book will debut there. I was so excited that everybody wanted to do that, and they've all taken an assignment to speak about some principle, some anchor, some leadership skill set that they feel is important in today's age of dynamic and ever evolving, ever changing environment that we live in. Because back to you and back to what you said at the beginning, leadership is not an easy thing.
Well,
Leadership.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you. What are the 4 principles?
So the 4, so I call them anchors. And the reason, I'll just show you the book. I'm big on ships, nautical, oceans, for the very reason that I just think that there's so much you can learn. You can't sit still when you're on the ocean in a ship and expect things to go well and expect to arrive somewhere safely. There's a team, it's an effort, there's a captain, everyone has to work in concert. And if you don't do a good job, you could end up, at the bottom of the sea. If you do a great job, you'll get there on time, people are happy, and your cargo arrives. But I use anchors, and somebody asked me, well, anchors, don't they hold you down? And I said, well, first of all, look at see my graphic. It shows an anchor coming out of the water. Anchors are on the ship to begin with, so it's not like they're going to hold the ship from any destination, but they allow you to have stability. They allow you to have that anchored, concept and commitment to leadership, and that's why I wanted to use them. So there's 4 of them. The first one is character. In the book, I use the example of Benjamin Franklin, who at the age of 20 years old in 1726, so that's almost been 300 years, felt like he needed to improve himself because he had behavioral problems. He knew he talked too much. He knew he drank too much. He did a lot of things that he shouldn't do, and so that he felt were not becoming of a leader or somebody that wanted to become successful. So at the age of 20, started this program called 13 Virtues. In my book, I use 13 competencies. And for 3 years now, I've been surveying people across the world, over 1,000 leaders now, to ask them, what are the principles, what are the competencies that you think a true leader should have? It ended up in the top 40, and then I ranked them to 13 so I could follow the program I've been teaching from Benjamin Franklin for all these years. So number 1 is character. His whole gist, his whole focus in life was to master his character. At the end of his life, he said, I failed at this, but he says, but I'm a much better man for having tried to do so. And so that's the idea, is how do you become a better person, the better version of yourself, the best version of your leadership self? How do you do that? Some people say, well, you work at it, you have goals, resolutions. Well, I'm sorry, but after 40 years of leadership and management experience and helping people, it has to be something you work on a daily basis. And character has to be the first thing you work on. So that people believe in you, they respect you, they think you're reputable. And like that thing I talked about for the introductions, no one's going to introduce me to someone at a high level unless they trust me. So character is the first one. Next one is mindset. Once I think I've taken care of myself, like you're on an airplane and they say, get your oxygen first so that you don't pass out trying to help somebody else. That's what character is all about. Make sure you're sound, that you're well-founded, and that you are ready to go out and do things and help people. But mindset means taking what you care about and keeping it in your mind on a regular basis, whether it's a mindset of integrity, a mindset of personal development, a mindset of loyalty. There's lots of different kinds of mindsets that you could have, and it kind of depends on the situation. I had a guy I did an internship for in Chicago. His name is Thomas Kuzmarski, who created a worldwide, globally known consulting firm. And today he runs an organization called Chicago Innovation, which has, I think, 18,000 members, fabulously successful. But Tom, when I was an intern for him, he introduced me and brought me into some of his most valued clients, including Hart Chapter and Marx, etc. that owns all the, the department stores. And Tom told me one time, he says, before we go in, he says, you have to prepare yourself. And I said, what does that mean? I said, I've been in sales for a long time. I think I know how to prepare myself. He says, no. He says, I want you to think of an imaginary black box. In this black box are hats. We need to talk about what's our objective today. Do you reach into that black box and put on the hat that's appropriate for this situation so that we don't get off mark? I thought it was a genius idea because it was very visual. And every time I go into a meeting now, I stop for a second and say, what's my objective? What am I trying to do? And then I put on this imaginary hat so that I can do the job I was sent there to do. So that's mindset. So the third one is learning and innovation. So a leader that says, okay, I've arrived, I'm doing well, I don't have to worry about anything, I just have to manage people, is going to be known as the person that gets dumber and dumber every year as a leader. I've had people tell me that. I said, leaders just get dumber every year because they stop learning, they stop getting involved in the business. They're not out, feet on the ground, they're not rolling up their sleeves, they're just managing from behind a desk. So a leader, a true leader that's dedicated, that's committed to learning and developing themselves on a regular basis, which is what my whole book's about, mastering influential leadership. And by the way, leadership, I put the word influential in front of it. Why? Because this darn, this great resignation is going on in our nation, really worldwide, where people are leaving. They say that Gallup says that by 2030, that 50% of the workforce could be independent. Can you even imagine what that would look like without having the collaborative teams and people never getting together? I mean, it would be disastrous in my view. So this ever-learning commitment to trying to improve yourself and then innovating, I think is critical. And the fourth one, I'll just mention, it comes right back, circles right back to influence. It's about becoming influential. You can't become influential unless people respect you. You can't do it unless you're sound, and well-founded yourself. And that goes back to that character part. Then the mindset, someone that's always carrying that mindset of what's important, what's critical, how are we improving ourselves with them, the ever-learning and innovative side of yourself and your team, which then brings you right back to that thing that says, people will not follow you unless they feel like they believe you, that you're inspirational, that you motivate them. And the saying that from my first book, I think is important, and I've also carried that into my second book, and that is that you cannot stand on a pedestal and declare yourself to be influential. That is a privilege that the people that follow you, the people that know you, the people that care about you, bestow upon you because they know you truly are. So because you have a title on a business card, it means nothing unless the people that follow you believe that you are a true leader because of these things I've just talked about. So those are the four, a little bit elaborative, but hope that helps a little bit.
Well, I'm going to ask you two questions. We have just about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
Well, my first one, what do you consider the most important attribute a leader should have?
Well, so I told you I have top 40 from the leaders I've surveyed. We narrowed those down to the top 13 for this principal program. And by the way, the reason 13, because 13 goes into 52 perfectly. If you practice one principle per week for an entire week over a 13-year period, and that's one cycle, and then do it 4 times a year, over years, if you keep doing that, you'll become marvelous and very adept and very skillful at many things. So I think the most important one, in my estimation, is integrity. It's one of the top 13 ranked ones out there. If people don't trust you, you can't ever have a long-term relationship. Their relationships will never become strategic because they're always worried about you. So integrity, which is something my father taught me at a young age, is so important. That's why the company I used to own was called Trust-Egrity, trust plus integrity. There's so many important principles and traits of a leader, but I really think integrity is number one.
It's funny. That's the one I consider the most important. But it's interesting. Do you think we've lost integrity in today's world?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful leaders. The people I interview are exemplary, and every one of them I think would qualify for a lot of these great traits and competencies I've been talking about. But the integrity comes to saying, I'll do what I said I'm going to do. And then the people say, oh, you're honest because you said you're going to do something, so you're honest, but you have integrity. It's a huge, huge factor. So if I say I'm going to do something and I never do it, or I entice you or our customers or to do or make a move or to do something and I don't do my part, I think you can lose your integrity overnight. I mean, there's so many great leaders in the past that have said that, you know, you can spend a lifetime building integrity and lose it in an instance if you betray the people that follow you, that think you're influential. So yeah, I think that's what it's all about.
But you know the saying, now a deal is only complete when the check clears the bank. If, you know,
Okay.
if you know, it's funny. When I started out in business, it was you a handshake seal the deal. But today it doesn't. Anyway, we have just first off, where can people get your book?
Thank you, Don. I really appreciate it. So Amazon, it's a Amazon bestseller. I was so gratified this week. This is my second book. I never expected it to become as successful in just a week as it has, but it's been #1 for the last 8 days in a row as a top hot new release. Amazon is the best place. You probably can get it from other stores too. They can order it for you, but I think Amazon's the quickest and fastest way to get it to you.
Okay, and what would you have about 2 minutes? What would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, first of all, please contact me, GaryCLaney.com, www, or GaryLaney.com, and Laney spelled Laney, so GaryLaney.com. I think it's just that, hey, this is an era where we need to pull together as people, not only who want to learn and develop and become you know, more competent in the things we do and influential, by the way, but how do we do it in a way that gives back to the world? The last chapter of my first book talks about give back. And I learned that a long time ago that giving back is not something you do when you're Warren Buffett and you've got billions of dollars. You do it at the very beginning of your career and you do it throughout. That's how you become influential, because people see that you care about helping others. I've spent 20 years getting involved in startups, trying to help entrepreneurs in some regards by buying the business and then developing it. But others are just helping them as an advisor. And I love to help people. I love to help entrepreneurs. Contact me if you need someone that's been through this process, that knows how to help you analyze, develop a plan, and carry it forward in a way that's going to be giving value to your customers and value to the people that you serve in your company. So I think that's it. I mean, let's work together. Let's make this a better world than we have today. And I think we have to do that by taking responsibility for who we are and what we do.
Well, on that note, we say thank you for a really great half hour. Thank you.
Don.